Hey, aloha and good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in for our second Talk Story event today. We'll be introducing Representative Belatti shortly, but I just wanted to say thank you for tuning in and participating in our democracy. And on behalf of the 14 chapters of in the Indivisible Hawaiʻi State-wide Network, we welcome you and appreciate you joining us in a call of action conversation to elect leaders that we deserve. Um, I will be hosting this event. My name is Dr. Vanessa Zepeda. I moved to Hawaii about 20 years ago. I'm UH alumni and I did my PhD in Australia and just moved back home about a year ago. I'm also the leader of the Indivisible Youth Action Group. Today, joining us again, we appreciate Sherry joining us for this second event. Sherry Bracken is a well-known newswoman, formerly with Hawaii Public Radio. She's hosted dozens of candidate forums and newsmaker interviews, and we really appreciate her volunteering with us today. Again, in case you are not familiar with Indivisible, Indivisible Hawaii is a national group, grassroots organization dedicated to defending our democracy and making sure that people have a voice in their government. We've held dozens of meetings with members of Congress and other elected officials. We've written postcards to over 180,000 voters in battleground states. We're probably most kind of known for our participation and organization of the huge rallies and protests that we have, like the No Dictators protests. Um, yeah, it's a great organization. We're so happy for you to be here. We don't have a lot of time, but before we get started, I want to say a quick friendly reminder to please watch the recording from yesterday's interview with Senator Jarrett Kalole. And please be on the lookout for a post-event survey that will hit you in your inbox, and just try to get that survey back to us by Sunday evening. We don't have a lot of time, so take it away, Sherry.
Thank you very much. Aloha to everybody, and aloha to Representative Della Belatti.
Aloha, Sherry. Good morning.
Rep. Belatti, thank you so much for being here today. You are running for United States House of Representatives, the congressional seat currently held by Ed Case. This is Congressional District 1, which is urban Honolulu, Hawaii Kai, Mililani, Ewa. It's not the neighbor islands. It's not rural Oahu. So I want everybody to, be focused on what we're talking about. Indivisible has invited all the current candidates running in the Democratic primary, and that includes existing Senator Jarrett Keohokalole. He's a Hawaii state senator, and of course, Representative Della Belatti, and also have invited the incumbent, Ed Case. Yesterday, we talked story with Senator Keohokalole. Congressman Case has not accepted the invitation of Indivisible. Should he accept it in the future, then we will be able to do a talk story. I am not personally affiliated with Indivisible. I'm just an independent moderator. Now, the goal today for us is to get to know Representative Belatti. And Rep. Belatti, I am guessing that some of our voters don't really know you. So tell us briefly about yourself.
Thank you, Sherry, and thank you to everyone who's joined us here. Again, my name is Della Belatti, and I'm running for Congressional District 1. I am the great-granddaughter of Chinese immigrants from Guangdong, China, who made their way through California and to Anahola, Kauai on the plantations. I am also the granddaughter of Sakata Filipino immigrants to Honolulu, who settled in Waipahu and the Ewa Beach area. I am married to my spouse of almost nearly 25 years. He is a military transplant, and our two beautiful daughters, Emma is a sophomore at UH Manoa. She graduated from McKinley High School, and my youngest daughter is a sophomore at Roosevelt High School. So we are a young girl. We are a young to middle-aged family here in Hawaii, and so I'm really running in part because of the conversations that I've had with my daughters over, I say, the last 5 years, beginning during the COVID pandemic. So I'm here to run and fight for working families just like mine's.
Representative Belatti, do you live inside Congressional District 1?
Yes, I'm the only candidate who lives and resides here in Congressional District 1. I was born and raised in Manoa Valley. I was only away from Congressional District 1 for 4 years while I attended Princeton University in New Jersey. But I wanted to really come home and contribute to my community. So after Princeton University, I came back and I taught at my old alma mater, Maryknoll School. And so I've just lived, raised my family, worked, and really been able to, I think, thrive. But I've been seeing the opportunities lessen here in Congressional District 1. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm running for Congress.
Do I understand correctly that you also went to law school at UH?
Yes. After teaching for 4 years, which I loved dearly, and actually that's my first passion, I was a social studies history teacher at Maryknoll School. I decided to go to law school at University of Hawaii William S. Richardson School of Law. I've been a practicing attorney since then. I've worked for two judges, Justice Simeon Akoba and Judge Del Rosario. So I have a wide depth of professional experience. All 18 years, 19 years, now going to be 20 years starting next year. When I served in elected office, I have been a practicing attorney. Um, I'm a litigator, and I've balanced and juggled both being a mother, a spouse, a litigator, and a state representative for the last 19, 20 years.
Are there particular issues in Congressional District 1 that caused you to run, issues that are not being addressed? Tell us more about why you decided to run for this seat and give up your incumbency, really, in the State House of Representatives.
So I really want to start with the stories that were occurring around my dinner table during COVID. Um, you know, Working families and the affordability issue has always been something important to me. And if you look back at my record, cost of living has been something that I've sought to address for years. Now, some people will say, you've been in it for so long, what have you done? Let me go through that in a little bit. But what I want to tell you is that around the dinner table during COVID, talking with my daughter and realizing how uh, angry this next generation of youth are and how they feel like they're being left behind. About 5 years ago, we learned that this is going to be the first generation that is not going to live, their life expectancy is not going to be longer than their parents or their grandparents. And so we have all of these indications. And then when I hear around the dinner table, my daughter saying things like, Mom, college isn't affordable anymore. Mom, I'm going to leave. If I leave Hawaii, I'm not coming back. Mom, the world is burning. What have you folks done about climate change? Mom, there is genocide happening around the world. What are you doing about it? So when I kept hearing my daughter pushing me on these things, I knew I needed to take it to the next level. Look, I've tried and we've made progress on some cost of living issues here at the state. We've done things. And from my very first day in the State House of Representatives, I was advocating for an earned income tax credit that we finally passed and made permanent, I think just 2 years ago. Right. So I'm persistent on working issues. It takes time to address cost of living issues. I was part of a leadership that invested uh, millions of dollars more into rental housing, uh, uh, you know, the low income housing renters units that we now have. But I want to take it to the next level. And so for me, it was those conversations, that pushing by my daughters who are 100% behind me in this race. I will say one other thing. The other thing that pushed me is the question of civil rights and access to reproductive health care. My daughters are now facing a time where they will have less access to healthcare rights than I ever did. I fought hard along with my Senate challenger. We worked together to ensure that women's rights and reproductive health care was going to be protected after Dobbs. But we have to do more. And I am better positioned, more experienced, and I have the skill set to take it to the next level.
Representative Belatti, there's a lot of talk sometimes about the closer you are to your constituents, the more you can get done. And right now you are in the Hawaii State House. What do you think you can accomplish at the federal level that is better for Hawaii residents than what you can accomplish if you were to continue and run again for your House seat?
Look, the reality is that I can continue to maintain contact with my constituents. That's not going to be an issue. That's not going to be a problem. But what we now have is a congressperson who, look, I agree with him 70% of the time. But for 30% of the votes, I think there is serious problems. And it's a question of values and it's a question of background. For me, the votes on voter suppression bills, the votes to silence nonprofit agencies, the votes to not support the civil rights of immigrants or the actions taken in not supporting the civil rights of immigrants. Those are the differences between me and my opponent. And indivisible Hawaii residents, the residents of CD1 can and will know that I will be consistent. Those are going to be bright lines that I will not move on because those are fundamental. Access to the voting booth is fundamental. When my opponent voted for the SAVE Act, and that was in February, I was actually conducting a webinar with grassroots folks, with an expert from Center of American Progress, and we were talking about the SAVE Act and how dangerous it was. And I told my organizer at that time, oh, I think we're safe. We're going to be okay. The 4 delegates in Hawaii are going to protect women's rights to vote. I was wrong. I was dead wrong. A month later, I went out and I got my passport because that voter suppression act would require women like me who have changed our names to prove through a passport who we are. I have voted all of my life. I am an American citizen, and now I have to prove who I am with a passport. Let me tell you, Sherry, that passport cost me $185. In this day and age, $185 is half of a grocery bill for some folks, and they're not going to want to spend it on that. And so we need to make sure that our values are represented in Congress. And that's why it's more than just about staying in touch. It's actually then voting for your constituents, voting for the working class people of Hawaii, of America. And that's what I will do.
Representative Belatti, I want to ask you a personal question. A few years ago, we elected a member of the United States Congress. And as you well know, one of the ways you have power at the federal level is if you develop seniority. And that means staying in the job for a long time. This individual left after 2 years saying that his family didn't really like the fact that he was working in Washington and there were issues like that. You have 2 children, you have a husband. Are you prepared? Is your family prepared for the sacrifice that really is working in Washington, D.C.?
Like I said, my daughters are 100% behind me. My husband is 100% behind me. I'm lucky that my daughters are older now. They want to come with me. And so I would welcome them to come with me. They are looking and exploring options of attending school. So they're 100% behind me. I would also say, if you just look at my record, 18 years in the state house, there's many other things I could have done. In fact, in the last 4 years, people were asking me, do you want to be a judge? Do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? And I was like, no, I'm very happy being in the state legislature where I could do work, legislative work that I can see translated into policies was very fulfilling. But now at this stage, knowing that I can affect policy at a national level, and there's a lot that we can do at the national level that I'm eager to get there to do.
You mentioned that at the dinner table, your daughters were talking about how the younger generation is feeling a bit disenfranchised. And a lot of younger people especially have expressed concern about the rise of authoritarianism, of people in government being corrupt and doing things for their own personal gain rather than for the good of the people and the country. Your own campaign website says one of your priorities is, quote, protecting our democracy and ending corruption. So if you agree that members of Congress need to fight to stop these kinds of abuses, how do you see yourself working towards that in Congress? Because I cannot think it would be an easy thing to do.
Well, I think fighting against authoritarianism in Congress is absolutely something we need to do. We need to fight against the policies that are rolling out. We need to speak out against administrative rules and policies that are saying things like criminalizing political dissent. I want to back up a little bit, Sherry, because it's not just about what I'm going to do in Congress, it's what I'm doing now. Um, Before we were really talking about authoritarianism, I was hosting in my community in July a workshop about the rise of authoritarianism. And I was talking about and working with people in the Indivisible Network to talk about how it's not going to just be elected leaders, it's going to be all of us. Because in all of the pillars of government and society, whether it's going to be faith leaders, or it's going to be government leaders, or it's going to be everyday people, we're going to have to stand up to authoritarianism. And there's ways we can do that by simply exercising the rights we have under our state and federal constitutions. So to that end, I am also continuing to work with groups like J20. We are hosting on December 29th for Oahu. And now this is specific to CD1. We have seen the increase of ICE enforcement across the nation. We have seen it happening in Maui and Big Island. On Maui and Big Island, they have networks that are rapidly responding to the ICE increased enforcement. On Oahu, it's larger, it's more anonymous. So the organizers here have taken a while to really flesh it out. And you know what? It's important. It's important that we did that because we want to do this correctly and we want to exercise our rights correctly under existing laws. Why is that important? Well, yesterday, Kristi Noem and the DOJ just released guidance to say that ICE is going to be allowed to go after protesters now and more people who are impeding with ICE enforcement. Look, I'm a civil rights attorney. We can videotape safely ICE enforcement. We can do that. That is protected under our state and federal constitution. So I am fighting that now. I'm going to be part of the organizing effort, but I want to take this energy that I have that I'm working on now. You better believe it. I can be consistent. What I do now is what I'm going to do in Congress. So I will continue to fight. We're going to have to, if we win the midterm elections, as we hope we will, as the blue wave, we're going to have to reverse a lot of policies that are very negative. We're going to have to protect nonprofits and the right to dissent. We have to do that. We have to articulate that in law because clearly this administration is finding executive orders and administrative rules and ways to disregard our civil rights. The other thing I will add to the question of corruption, I am working on anti-corruption measures now, and I'm going beyond just the window dressing that we sort of did initially with the bribery charges that came down against some of our own. Now, there is an effort, and I want to urge your people watching this, tinyurl.com/restore public trust. We have an issue of corruption now that I am one of the few Democrats, along with a Republican. So I want to share with you, I'm also able to cross party lines when it's important. And I think anti-corruption is a nonpartisan issue. I have been asking and calling on the Attorney General, on our Campaign Spending Commission to actively investigate who the $35,000 bandit is. It is a current, possibly sitting legislator. And
Why don't
I
you
have,
explain that a little more for people who may not know your reference about the $35,000 bandit?
well, in the investigations done by the Department of Justice here, there was an instance where an influential legislator received $35,000 in a paper bag as part of a sting with then Representative Ty Cullen and an unknown other person. So we, Representative Susan and I, when that came to light, when that information came to light, we were pressing the Attorney General here, the Attorney General Sorensen here, to release that information to our law enforcement, state law enforcement agencies, because in reality, the laws might be only prosecutable under state laws. And so that's not something the federal government will get involved in. Then I will say that there is this notion out there, and so there's this conversation going on right now with legislative leaders, including Senate legislative leaders. So I would urge my Senate opponent to jump in with me and call for the investigation. Now, the leadership is going to say, well, we did that, and we've authorized the state attorney general to do that via a corruption unit. Look, we, under the state constitution, are the only ones who can regulate ourselves on certain ethics violations. So we cannot shirk our duty under our state constitution. And let me tell you, Congress is able to do parallel investigations with their DOJ. We see it all the time. That's called the Epstein files. So this notion that somehow we cannot conduct our own investigation is shibai. What it is we need to execute our duties and use all of our authorities under state law. So I'm doing that here. I know it's going to ruffle feathers, but within our own Democratic Party, and I will acknowledge this, we have many people in our state who are frustrated with our own Democratic Party. We, Democrats here in Hawaii, just like nationally, have to examine what we're doing here and what we need to do differently. I will argue that we need to tackle corruption at its root cause. Now, there are some Democrats who are joining me here in the state house, so I welcome that. But it's something that we need to do here. You better believe it that when I go to Congress, what you see on this screen, Sherry, I'm going to be the same person. I'm going to be calling for investigations when they need to happen. I'm not going to just defer and say, oh, the Department of Justice can do it. Oh, the state attorney general can do it. No, we have authorities under our state constitution, under our federal constitution to exercise our rights as the legislative branch. And you better believe it, the legislative branch is an equal branch of government, and I will fight for those authorities, whether I'm here at the state or in Congress.
What you talk about is exactly what kind of turns people off to politicians, the legislature, and so it's good to hear your response. Now, there's something that you touched on in kind of your opening remarks about why you were running, and that is affordability. And you have that on your website as one of your priorities, lowering costs for Hawaii families. And as everybody knows, the cost of living here in Hawaii is pretty high, and it's you referenced the $185 just to get a passport, which might not be in people's budget, as an example. But tell us more about what you've done here in the state to help local families be in a more affordable position so they can buy what they need, and then how you would translate that to the federal level.
So as I said earlier, Sherry, I have been a proponent of things like the earned income tax credit from my very first day in office. And so we accomplished that and made that permanent just several years ago for a state counterpart. I've also supported rental assistance. One thing I'm very proud of is during the COVID pandemic, Hawaii was one of the leaders in drawing down the renters assistance to keep people in their homes. Then Housing Chair Nadine Nakamura and Vice Chair Troy Troy Hashimoto were part of it, but I connected them. I connected them with the stakeholders in the access to justice mediation world, with judges who helped them make that program a reality. So I'm very proud of all the ways in which I've helped to make things more affordable in Hawaii at the state level, but we need to do more. And that's why I would like to go to Congress, because I think there are three affordability areas. And this is just the first three that we can tackle. First of all, there's strengthening social security. And I'm very pleased that Senator Schatz I think a few days ago, introduced legislation to protect and expand Social Security. Those are the kinds of measures I'm going to say, introduce and support. So one really important piece of that SAFE Act is phasing out the payroll tax cap so that payroll taxes apply fairly to every dollars of wages earned. Also, I'm going to update, and it updates the annual cost of living adjustments, and it makes sure benefits calculations will put more money into the pockets of families. Now, the other thing I won't do with Social Security is that I think now the age for retirement in Social Security is 67. You know, people want to and have looked to retirement in their 60s, not in their 70s. So I will not push that age up any further. We need to figure out ways to strengthen Social Security so it allows people to retire with dignity. And that's not when they're in their 70s. It's when they're in their 60s. And so I want to do that. And I believe my opponent before has voted to increase the Social Security age. Another thing that I would pass, another affordability thing I would pass would be the child care tax credit. Immediately in COVID, when that was extended to all families and there was no cap on that, you saw middle class families like my own benefit from that. And the child care tax credit was deep sixed as part of the negotiations with the Biden infrastructure plan, in part because of some of the positions taken by my opponent. So you're going to see me on issues of affordability vote for and with working class people all the time. One final affordability area that I'm very interested in exploring is a renter's tax credit or rental assistance. Look, there's national groups who are arguing for these kinds of things, right? Home ownership has not become the norm anymore. It is out of reach for far too many people. So we need to provide renters assistance. Now, people are going to say, well, that's going to cost money. Well, my response to that is, well, let's stop giving away all of the tax benefits to the uber rich. It's about priorities. And so you're going to see me, again, always looking at ways where we balance. We have to approach this with balance. We have to demand accountability. We have to make sure that waste, fraud, and abuse are not rampant. But on the other hand, we also have to vote for our priorities. And that is for policies that actually help working class people, not corporations and not the uber wealthy. And so that's what I will do.
Representative Belatti, you probably know, and the audience knows, that audience members are submitting questions. And the first thing I want to say is that there's a lot of questions. Some of them, the sponsoring organization is going to be conducting one-on-one interviews in private with each of the candidates who agrees to do that. And so far, Representative Belatti and Senator Keohoko have agreed. Congressman Case has not. So some of those questions will be more appropriate for the private session. But here's one that's really important that we're getting a lot on, and that is people have concerns about the influence that could be wielded on lawmakers from large, sometimes unidentified entities, which are donors. So talk about your plans about accepting money from political action committees, PACs. Will you, won't you, certain ones, yes? Tell us more about your position on that.
So I am the only candidate in this race that's not accepting corporate PAC money.
From any corporation?
Corporate PAC money, I'm not accepting.
Will
And
you,
I am also not accepting money from APAC or APAC affiliated donors.
and explain what APAC is, please?
APAC is the money that funds the Israeli efforts.
The
And
American
so,
Israel Public Affairs Committee? Okay.
yes, I've not been, to my knowledge, I have not been approached by any APAC funders yet, but I have, and in part, it's because I was very clear from the very beginning that I would not be taking corporate PAC money or APAC money.
Will you take money from any political action committee?
I will if it's unions. I believe that the unions, that's part of their free association rights, and so that's important. I will accept money if I'm so lucky to receive it from civil rights organizations, that align with my values. But really, the litmus test will be for me will be groups and individuals who will stand with me for working class families. I will already say that I know what I'm fundraising. I've only accepted money so far from individuals. And I have been so pleased. I just want to say this one thing. I've been so pleased that I've had retirees uh, give me money and it warms my heart. Uh, I've I've had people give me as little as $5, and I've had people give me as much as $3,500. And these are from real people that I know. So to every one of my donors out there, thank you. And to everyone who would like to donate to a people-centered campaign, please consider my candidacy.
Representative Belatti, another question from the viewers has to do with the Supreme Court. Many people feel that the Supreme Court is making rulings inconsistent with previous norms, possibly the Constitution, inconsistent with mandates from Congress. So there have been many suggestions on possible ways to change this, ranging from term limits, increasing the number of justices, but there also might be other ways to address this issue. What are your thoughts?
I think everything needs to be on the table. Look, we've gone through periods of history where, members of the legislative and executive branch have threatened to quote unquote pack the court. Well, the court has already been packed. So if we need reforms at the Supreme Court, I will not turn my back on those. In particular, I think we need some real conflict of interest reforms for the Supreme Court. So that is a bare minimum. I think separately also, as Congress, the legislative branch always has the authority to write laws. So Congress should get to work to writing laws and making it explicit what is the policies of the United States. We are a country that opens our arms and welcomes immigrants. We are a country that ensures and wants healthcare access to all. So let's start writing laws like that.
Representative Belatti, you are a former chair of the House Health Committee, and so you're very much aware of the public health issues on our islands. And one of our viewers said, and I know a lot of people feel this way, they're very concerned about Robert Kennedy Jr. and some of his policies and the attack on vaccines. So, what are your thoughts about what you can do on a federal level to protect public health?
Well, I think we're going to have to restore many federal agencies, not just the CDC. We're also going to and should be relying upon experts that are well vetted and not simply the next level people, that we can get to say what we want them to say. We should be in alignment with World Health Standards and all those types of things. I'm pleased that at the state, we can also do things to ensure that public health and public health is maintained. And so those are the kinds of things that I would do. On healthcare specifically, and I want to take it in this direction if I may, Sherry. When I was health chair, I was health chair at a time when we were implementing the Affordable Care Act. So I know full well how important those healthcare credits are for working families. I know there are small business owners right now who are making the choice between whether to pay for health insurance for themselves or to go without. And so we need to do everything to extend those healthcare credits. But besides that, the other thing that I think we need to do, and if I have a chance to go to Congress, is that we do need to explore Medicare for all. Advocates here at the state level have been saying, why can't we have universal health care here in Hawaii? And I've told them time and time again, we need to go back to Congress because that is something that needs to be done with Medicare and Medicaid. So my challenge that I would take on immediately is that one of the things we have to do is when we implement Medicare for all, we're going to have to implement it so that it fits with Hawaii's innovative prepaid healthcare act. And there's a way to do it. I think there are proposals in Congress right now that expand Medicare for all by lowering the age bracket and making it optional for people to apply for Medicare for all. We can't stop there because people will say, and I know industry folks here will say, well, the Medicare rates here for Hawaii are far too low. So you better believe it. I will be part of those conversations where we're advocating for higher rates, Medicare reimbursement rates for the state of Hawaii. I will
And when,
acknowledge.
when you say the rates are too low, are you referring to the amount of money paid to the doctors for their work by Medicare, or the rates are too low for my premium if I'm paying for it?
So I believe it's the rates are too low for providers. And
Right.
so that's why
Okay.
they don't and that's why we need to this is going to be a complicated effort. Medicare for all is a slogan. When we do this in Congress, and I think there's going to be a way for us to do this, you're going to need to have people who understand each of their state systems, and then to be able to advocate for a bill that fits the nation, but then also um, protects our state. Look, the Prepaid Healthcare Act was protected specifically by legislation that was pushed by Senator Inouye. That's the kind of focus we need, and we can do it. I firmly believe that we can do it. It's going to take knowledge base. It's going to take people who are willing to have the patience to build relationships and educate individuals about how unique Hawaii is. And then it's going to take building relationships so that we can build a bill, not the big, beautiful bill, but a bill that really works for working class families and for healthcare for all, Medicare for all. That's what I'm committed to.
Representative Belatti, right now you are in the Hawaii State House, which has 51 members, and you'd be moving to a much larger venue. The United States House of Representatives has 435 members. Clearly, one of your goals would have to be able to influence others to understand what our state is like, what's different and unique about our state, and what we need. Talk about how you have used the ability to influence here in the state and how you would translate that, to be a leader in Congress, even if you are not technically a leader, meaning I don't think he'll be the Speaker of the House on day one. But, just talk about how we can feel confident that you can get the job done.
Jerry, I want to respond to that question by saying, look at my record. And what I'm going to share about my record is that I actually entered the state house as what was then known as a dissident. I spoke truth to power on my very first day. So I've never been afraid to vote no. And that was a hard vote. Then uh, Representatives Sylvia Luke and Scott Psyche joined me in voting no. But I was the freshman legislator that did that. And the reason I did that was because of values. I saw a leadership that was not responsive to the people of Hawaii, the people of my district. Then I worked over the next 20 years, and my experience, my record demonstrates that I also know how to be a team player. For some people to say, oh, she doesn't know how to be a team player, I rose to majority leader. We were able to make some progress, some real progress at addressing affordability issues. My work with Sylvia Luke, Aaron Johansson, to some degree, then Majority Leader Scott Psyche, we moved the needle for marriage equality. We moved the needle for tax credits and affordable housing. We moved the needle for clean energy. Now, I have also now come to a point, I am second most senior member in the House. And actually, when I was making the decision to run, I was taking a look around, and some people, some of my colleagues, dear colleagues of mine, said, we don't want to lose you. You have too much knowledge. You have too much experience. But one of the things that I was learning is that perhaps my time in the State House has passed. Again, my contemporaries are Sylvia Luke, who's gone on to become Lieutenant Governor. My contemporaries were Mark Takai, who went and served in the U.S. House. Mark Nakashima, uh, Scott Psyche is also no longer in the state house. So I trust in the voters of the state of Hawaii, and they have put in some very good leaders. There is a new generation of leaders. So in some ways, I may actually be a hindrance in the state house. What I want to do now in my last remaining years as in my professional career is to go to some place where I know I can make a difference and bring all of this knowledge and skill sets, skills that I developed as a dissident, skills that I developed as being the majority leader, to be able to navigate spaces where I may or may not be in the ins or the outs. I know how to navigate those spaces. I know how to build relationships. And so I want to go to Congress to be able to do that. One other thing that I would do is that one of the things that I've done over the last 18 years, as I've built up my experience, my knowledge base in healthcare, in energy issues, in affordability issues, and now in public safety issues. I have been developing a network of individuals across the nation, and it's so exciting to see people like Afton Ben or Hector Della Torre, people who I have worked with and talked with at different conferences, also throwing their names in the ring. There's going to be a new generation of leaders in Congress. I hope to build relationships with them. I've worked and talked with them at other conferences, and I'm excited. We're going to need that new group of leaders, including a new representative for Congressional District 1, who does not carry the baggage of some of these really bad votes that do not reflect the values of Hawaii and our working class families. I am going to be ready on day one to be able to start working with those individuals. And in fact, I'm working with some of those individuals and those groups like the Center for American Progress to make sure that our elections now in 2026 are going to be safe and fair and valid. I'm working with groups that are across the nation looking to ensure that the civil rights of individuals are not squashed. So I will take that experience that I have developed, the networks I've already developed, and bring that with me to Congress to work on day one on protecting the rights of Hawaii's working families.
One of the concerns of many people in Hawaii is the obvious impact to us here of climate change. And although at the federal level, the Trump administration does not acknowledge that climate change exists, you can see it happening, having a negative effect in many, many states. And it doesn't make any difference if it's a Democratic controlled state or Republican controlled state. So, talk about your plans to help address that at the federal level. And I realize it's tough given the intransigence of the current administration. But what are you going to do to protect us here in Hawaii? Because we clearly are feeling the impacts.
Sherry, your question it's actually very timely. Just yesterday, I was on a Council of State Government webinar, a Zoom, where we were discussing what Western states are doing to band together to fight the threats of wildfires, right? We know that the wildfire in Lahaina was intensified because of the intense winds that we are having. So climate change is not just about rainfall or things like that, or lack of rainfall or global warming. It's about these intense periods of weather that we're experiencing across the globe. And what I found very helpful about that Council of State Governments webinar is that I was talking across party lines and problem solving with Republicans. So, yes, this administration may not understand or want to acknowledge, but the Republican Party and some of their members are acknowledging that. And I want to, again, take that knowledge that I've learned and bring it to Congress to be able to work with individuals who are willing to work and problem solve. That's one way that we can address climate change. Another way that we can address climate change at the national level is simply the investment in infrastructure that some of it's been being pulled back on by this administration because they don't like certain infrastructure projects. Well, I'm sorry, but part of addressing climate change is going to be about how are we making our transportation system more resilient? How are we making our transportation system more clean? So all of those kinds of things that this administration has rolled back on, we need to reinvest in. And they may not seem like climate change measures, but they certainly are. Here in this state, we have seen the Navahini lawsuit, where we had students challenging the Department of Transportation and the state to do more um, with ensuring that we are a climate resilient state. Well, part of the settlement of the state has been to agree to make sure our transportation systems and our transportation budget is strengthened. So much of our transportation budget has to do with the federal budget. And so my working relationships with people like Ed Sniffen, I hope to maintain and to continue to build on. That's another way that we can deal with climate change at the federal level in very concrete ways. And those are the things that I'm prepared to do.
You talk about infrastructure and our reliance on federal dollars, and certainly we see that on Hawaii Island. You're not running for the congressional seat that represents Hawaii Island, but we see it really all over the state. And talk more about how, at the federal level, you would work to convince others that we need to get our fair share of those dollars. Clearly, Senator Daniel Kainoe was a whiz at that, with his seniority and with his influence. But talk more about that and the federal issues that are involved with infrastructure funding.
I think this is really important where the delegation of four has to be in sync. And that's where I would strive and work towards building relationships with my colleagues. And then we have to be able to communicate our needs to people in the other party and to hopefully people who will be new to Congress from the same party. And so I'm ready to do that kind of relationship building. I will also say in another area of relationship building that we need to work on and that I've been very fortunate to be able to do as the chair of public safety over the last, I became chair of public this past year, is that as tense as individuals, um, as tense as people feel and as anxious as sometimes people have with our relationships with the military, we need to continue to have open conversations with the military. And I'm going to tackle this head on, Sherry. Look, the conversations around the military leases will require a delegation to be strong in asserting our rights as a state for more than just $1 a year lease. Like, I think it's really important. And so I'm pleased to see the kind of coordination that uh, Representative Jill Takuda and Senator Schatz are in pushing and making sure that their colleagues understand what we need here in Hawaii. I would continue those kinds of things. As chair of public safety over the last year and a half, I've been able to work with the Military Affairs Council. And look, we've had frank conversations about what it's going to mean with the renegotiation of the leases. Now, our governor, I'm glad he has pulled back and acknowledged that condemnation is not on the table. From my perspective, it was never really on the table. It can be on the table if there is some kind of a real global emergency, but condemnation also has to follow a process. So what I think we have to do as both state legislators and as our federal delegation, which federal delegation has been doing and what the state has been doing, is we have to monitor the conversations, make sure the appropriate stakeholders are at the table. That will mean, I believe, the Office of Hawaiian Affairs needs to be at the table, as well as others in the negotiation of the leases. Now, we are lucky that the leases are a few years out. We didn't have this, there was this kind of premature timeline of this December. No, the leases expired later. And so we have time to have very reasonable conversations. We also have time for the change in the midterms. And so I think it's going to be really important if there is a blue wave that individuals in the congressional delegation have to be ready and prepared to quickly explain the importance of why these negotiations have to be in a way that reflects our interest in the state of Hawaii. Now, I know I'm spending a little bit of time on this, but here's a great example.
That's good.
One proposal that was floated was there could be some kind of land swap, some kind of land change. The Bureau of Prisons here in Honolulu has a federal detention center. Well, maybe that could somehow be transferred over to the state. That is going to take an act of Congress.
You
That is
mean the
going to
US
require
Congress?
the US Congress. So I will definitely be part of any of those conversations. But I will say that that seems like a far-fetched idea to me because what we do know about the federal detention center right now is that bed space has been ramped up and used for the detainment of so-called illegal immigrants. And we know that Hawaii's federal detention center is being home to immigrants who have been moved from detention center to detention center. Because of my background as a civil rights attorney, in contact with some of the immigration attorneys, we are hearing reports that there are people who have been transferred to 5 different detention centers. Hawaii is the last place they were detained, they were moved to, and that is the place where they finally got their papers and an explanation. So I actually don't think that that's a real possibility that the federal government is going to give up the federal detention center. So in that respect, you better believe it. I will be on them for oversight. They need to explain to us what is happening in the federal detention center because FDC Honolulu right now is part of a system of detainment centers across the nation that I think when history gets told 25 years from now, we are going to see echoes of Japanese internment camps. We are going to hear echoes of that story being repeated in our detention centers across the nation. And we need to hold people accountable now.
It feels like we're hearing those echoes right now. Recently, not long ago, there was ICE raid on a home on Maui that turned out to have a whole lot of teachers, most of whom were not illegally here in the country. Are you aware of any explanation that ICE has ever given about why they are going after those folks or other folks? There was some big raids on Kauai. We've had them here on Big Island as well.
I think if we want to hear from ICE, we're not going to hear from them. All we have to do is look at what the Supreme Court has done and has authorized already, which is in California, they said that they can stop essentially people of color. And so it's not simply just what any federal agency is doing now. Some of these raids and these sweeps are now being authorized by Supreme Court cases. And so this is where, Sherry, this is where I think it's not going to just be about individual leaders. And this is why I am so proud to be part of this Indivisible Hawaii network. I think for those who have studied authoritarian governments, we know it's going to take everybody. It's going to take everybody to stand up in the ways that they can and the ways to do it safely. I am not going to argue for wholesale riots or protests. That is not what I'm going to do. I'm going to stand up for peaceful protest, for protests that are lawful, for actions and conduct that are protected under our US Constitution and state constitution. I say this, Sherry, because I'm actually very, very, very concerned. My opponents in the Republican Party are going to try to paint normal, everyday people who care about their neighbors as somehow being criminal. I am not a criminal if I stand up and safely record what I see as ICE maybe sweeping someone off the street. I can do that in a safe manner, and that is not impeding their investigation. And I want to be clear about that. Because if we don't stand up now, both as leaders, for me, it's important to stand up as a state representative for our civil rights, but even faith leaders who are taking that risk, if we don't stand up now, we're going to look back on this time and be like, where were the people who stood up for them? You know, former Attorney General Doug Chin, when he was dealing with the first Trump administration, some of the stories he heard and from Japanese Americans, right? You know, people who are not going to come out and rabble rouse, who said the thing that hurt the most was when there was silence, when no one stood up for me or my family. So we can't do that. We can't do that at this moment in history. We have to stand up. That's why when my opponent did not sign a letter with the other three delegates in our congressional district to just stand up for the basic civil rights, that's another reason why I stood up and said, no, I want to bring the values of Hawaii. I want to bring our history and our commitment to civil rights to the United States Congress. Um, that's what we need to do. And I'm so glad to be part of this network that's also asking individuals to stand up because it's going to take all of us. They're not going to round up all of us. Sherry, they can't. They won't round up all of us. They may try, but if we stand together in solidarity with each other, we will be able to protect the people who are simply just trying to live their lives.
You know, you talked about the Supreme Court's decision that ICE can stop somebody because essentially of the color of their skin, which is terrifying. Is that something that Congress can address at the federal level?
Absolutely. I mean, we can make very clear what are the reasons for stops, and most of them are already in case law. But now that the U.S. Supreme Court is rewriting case law, we have to step in as Congress. Here's one thing. I want to share this story because this actually really scared me. And if people think that somehow, oh, Della is just saying the sky is falling, she's Chicken Little. In August, I traveled to Boston with my oldest daughter who's 20. She looks nothing like me, or she does, but she's Hapa Haole, so she sort of looks mixed, but you can't really tell. She's one of those like, you know, Hapa Haole kids who you can't really tell. I happened to, we traveled nonstop to Boston, but then on our way home, we had to stop in LA. Um, so I made this terrible mistake and I forgot one of the digits on her birthday. She's born on May 5th and I put May 5th. I'm sorry, she's born on May 15th and I put May 5th. In Los Angeles, we were stopped because I had put the wrong birth date on her on her ticket. And I was just I had actually there was a moment in time where I was going to split off with her and maybe send her home by herself. If she had gone by herself in Los Angeles and she was only stopped in Los Angeles, there's a chance that she could have been detained because I made a mistake. I made an honest mistake of putting in, and we explained what happened. You could just see everyone in the line pause and freeze. This was in August. Think about now that ICE enforcement has increased. If we think that we are immune from it in Hawaii, we are not. My heart just skipped a beat when I realized, and I could hear the agent talking to my daughter. And so I like quickly like resolved it, we resolved it and we fixed it. But imagine now, my daughter who looks Hapa Haole, you cannot place what she is. She looks Latino. She could have been stopped. That's the kind of America we live in now where people of color have to worry about that. Um, that's not the America I was raised in. We need to change that narrative. And we can do that through laws, through policies.
Okay. Representative Belatti, we're getting towards the end of our time together. I'd like to give you time to talk about other priorities that I haven't asked you about. We looked at your website, and I think we've talked about many of the priorities that you have listed, but give us a little more information about anything you think that we should know. And I just want to let the audience know we're going to be turning this back to Vanessa Zapata, who will remind you about some things like where you can get the videos of this and the discussion we had yesterday with Senator Keohokalole, and then where you can continue to get information as this organization looks at the candidates and the issues. But Representative Della Belatti, tell us more about what we should know as people are making decisions on for whom to vote in the Democratic primary, which will come up next August.
Thank you, Sherry, and thank you to Dr. Zepeda, and thank you to all of the Indivisible Hawaii Network. We've covered so much ground. I don't know that there's necessarily anything new I have to say, but what I do want to say is just thank you for this opportunity. Between now and August, this race is going to be about electing the best person for Congressional District 1? Who is going to bring the values of Hawaii? Who is going to be consistent in voting for and acting upon those values? Who is going to be bringing the integrity and the commitment to working families of Hawaii? And I would argue and assert that it's me and that I will work to earn every vote in Congressional District 1. Please visit my website at dellabelatti.com. Please, if you so feel my campaign is not going to be powered and fueled by corporate PACs. It is going to be powered and fueled by people like you. If there's any amount that you can give, please visit dellabelatti.com. I'm going to be making an effort to get out to every community. I've already crisscrossed the district, being in places. On one weekend, I was in Manoa, Makiki, Punchbowl, Aiea, Waipahu, Pearl City. And so Hawaii Kai, I'm going to be crisscrossing the district. And so if you see me, stop me. If you want to connect with me, dellabelatti.com. I am going to be talking and working hard to earn every single vote that I can in Congressional District 1. Thank you, Sherry.
Thank you, Rep. Belatti. And I just have one more question before I turn things back over to Vanessa, which is if you go to Washington, you're representing the people of Hawaii. How do you plan to stay in touch with the people of Hawaii and make sure that their issues are being communicated to you very clearly?
Sherry, I will do more than host teletown halls, although that's going to be an important way to do it because, we've seen how effective that is. But it's about also being back here in Hawaii. There's time to travel back. There's going to be time to always have town halls. It has been a hallmark of mine as a state representative to be always listening to community. So people will be able to reach out to me at any point. I will have an active group of folks here. I've done it through every interim session here as a state legislator, and I will continue to do it as a congressperson in Washington, D.C.
Thank you so much, Representative Della Belatti. And now Dr. Vanessa Zepeda with Indivisible will conclude our session.
Thank you so much, Representative Belatti, for participating with us today. That was a really great chat full of information, which is, I think, exactly what our voters want to hear. I wanted to thank Sherry again for your fabulous interviewing skills and
You're
for
welcome.
volunteering your time to participate in these talk stories with us. Um, Again, friendly reminder, we just want to remind everybody, please watch both of these events, including the one that was recorded yesterday. If you're looking for those recordings, all you have to do is click on that registration link and it'll take you right to those recordings. We are going to be sending a follow-up survey in your inbox. Please keep an eye out for that, and it would be great to get that feedback as soon as possible, no later than Sunday evening. Um, we just also want to say that again, this 2026 primary election is very important. And it's never too late to register to vote, especially if you've changed your name or if you've changed your address. Get involved, participate in our democracy. And thank you again so much for participating. If you have any questions or want to get more involved with Indivisible in general, you can go to indivisiblehawaii.org. Yeah, thank you for your participation. This is Vanessa with Indivisible, signing out.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Aloha.